The hall was full of flashing lights and moving cameras, but something in the air felt different. People were smiling, reporters were shouting questions, and the world saw a normal press conference. Yet behind every word spoken on stage, an unseen tension waited quietly, like a secret that had been hiding for many years. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock sat side by side at the long table, answering questions about their new film. They looked calm, they looked professional, they looked exactly the way the world expected them to look. But what no one knew was that this press day was not important because of the movie. It was important because of what would happen after the cameras went off. The first 30 minutes passed with normal questions. Reporters talked about stunts, acting, chemistry, storylines, and memories from their old film speed. The audience enjoyed seeing them together again. Everyone smiled, everyone clapped, everyone thought this was just another Hollywood moment. But Sandra kept glancing at Keanu when no one was looking. And Keanu, in his usual quiet way, kept nodding and listening, as if he was aware of her silence even when she said nothing. This was not a friendship built on noise. It was built on something the public had never fully understood. As the final reporter asked the last question, the host stood up and announced the end of the conference. The lights dimmed, workers began removing microphones, and everyone assumed the show was over. People started leaving the hall. Crew members unplugged cameras, sound engineers packed their bags, and the crowd slowly dissolved, but one small thing was not noticed. A tiny lapel mic, placed near the center of the table, was still on. No one switched it off. No one unplugged the receiver. The sound feed continued running in the studio room, storing every word, every breath, every second. The hall was now quiet, seats empty, curtains still, cameras asleep. Only two people remained on stage, Keanu and Sandra. Sandra did not stand up. She just sat there, looking at the empty hall in front of her like she was staring at her own memories. Keanu watched her for a moment, then sat back down, not saying anything. Sometimes silence is the most respectful form of understanding. He did not ask if she was fine. He did not push her to speak. He just stayed. That was always his way. After a long pause, Sandra finally spoke, her voice soft, almost afraid of being heard. "Keanu, do you ever wonder what people think when they watch us?" Keanu looked at her with the same calm expression he always had. "They probably think we just work well together." Sandra nodded slowly. "They think it is just acting. Just another movie. Just another press day." Then her voice changed. Deeper, heavier. "They have no idea why I am still here." Keanu did not react. He just waited. This was not a man who rushed answers. He listened with patience, like someone who respected every word even before it was spoken. Sandra took a long breath. "There was a time, many years ago, when I wanted to quit all of this. Not because of failure, not because of fame, but because I felt alone in a room full of people." Keanu's eyes lowered, like he already knew where this was going. "I remember," he said quietly. Sandra looked at him, surprised. "You remember?" "You never said anything," Keanu replied. "But silence has its own language." The line hit something inside her. She looked away, as if the truth was too sharp to face directly. "I thought no one saw what I was going through back then," she whispered. "I thought I was invisible." Keanu shook his head gently. "You were never invisible, just unheard." Sandra closed her eyes for a moment. Her voice trembled when she spoke next. "You did something back then, something I never thanked you for, something no one ever knew you did." Keanu said nothing. "He was the kind of man who helped without needing to be remembered." "You showed up early every morning," Sandra said. "Not for the film, not for the job, but for me. You stood there near the trailers before anyone else arrived. You made sure I never walked in alone." The hall echoed with silence. "I thought it was coincidence at first," she continued. "But then I noticed. Every time I was nervous, you were already there. Every time I wanted to disappear, you made space for me without saying a single word." Keanu looked down at his hands. He had no interest in taking credit for something that was never meant to be seen. "I did not want you to feel alone," he finally said. Sandra nodded, her eyes glassy. "But you did more than that. You protected me. Not from danger, not from people, but from losing myself." There was a stillness in the air now. The kind of stillness that only arrives when truth is finally spoken after years of silence. And yet, neither of them knew the mic was recording every word. Not a hidden camera, not a dramatic setup, not a planned confession. Just pure honesty in an empty room that the world was never meant to hear, but it would. Not today, not in 1 hour, but soon. And when it did, people would finally understand what respect looks like when it does not need an audience. The story was not about romance, not about fame, not about Hollywood gossip. It was about a man who stood beside someone quietly for decades. Simply because kindness does not need applause, the world would learn that the greatest support is often invisible, and the secret would not be kept for long because the mic was still on. The quiet hall felt like a place frozen in time. The world outside had gone back to noise, but inside those walls only two voices existed. Neither Keanu nor Sandra knew that a single mic, no bigger than a coin, was still sending every sound into a recording system that no one was monitoring. The strange thing about truth is that it often appears in moments that look ordinary. No spotlight, no script, no audience, just two people, finally saying what should have been said years ago. Sandra leaned back in her chair, staring up at the ceiling like she was searching for the right memory to put into words. "You know what still surprises me?" she said softly. "You never told anyone. Not once. No interviews. No jokes. No stories about how you helped me." Keanu smiled a little, the calm, gentle smile that never belonged to Hollywood cameras. "I did not help you for the story," he said. "I helped you because you deserved peace." Sandra shook her head, almost in disbelief. "You never wanted people to know?" "Why would I?" Keanu replied. "Kindness loses meaning when it needs attention." Her eyes softened. That was the thing about Keanu. He did not just say kind things. He lived them so naturally that people almost missed how rare it was. Sandra looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "You protected me in a world that pretends to care." Keanu didn't interrupt. He let her speak. That was something he had always done. Let silence make space for honesty. "Back then," she continued, "I was dealing with things nobody saw. I was smiling on set, doing interviews, looking successful to everyone. But inside I was breaking." Keanu lowered his head slightly, almost like someone remembering a storm they once walked through quietly. "You do not have to explain," he said gently. "No," Sandra replied. "I do, because I never understood something until now. I thought you stood near me because we were co-stars. I thought it was just professional support. But it wasn't. It was something deeper. It was respect. And you offered it long before anyone else ever did." Keanu stayed silent again, but this time his silence held emotion, not dramatic emotion. Quiet, humble emotion that comes from knowing someone finally sees the truth. Sandra continued. "Do you remember that one day after the scene with the bus explosion? I was sitting alone behind the trailer, holding my head, shaking. I had made up my mind that I was done. I was going to quit acting after that movie." Keanu nodded. "I remember," he said. "You walked over, sat beside me, and did nothing. No speech, no advice, no pressure. Just sat. I didn't understand it then. I thought you were waiting for the scene, but you were waiting for me. You stayed until I could breathe again." Keanu looked up, his eyes steady. "That is what friends do." "No," Sandra whispered. "That's what guardians do." Keanu blinked once, slowly, as if the word went deeper than she meant it to. The hall was silent again, but something had changed. Sandra wasn't just thanking him anymore. She was revealing a piece of the story even he had not fully understood. Then something unexpected happened. A crew assistant entered the hall from the side door, looking for leftover equipment. He spotted Keanu and Sandra still on stage, gave a polite smile, and walked out again. Neither of them knew he had noticed the small red light still glowing on the mic receiver, but he did not think much of it. He assumed it was already switched off. He left it there, and so the recording continued. Sandra took a deep breath, knowing she had more to say. "You know what the industry told me back then?" she said. "They said I was lucky to be in a big movie. They said I should be grateful. They said if I could not handle pressure, someone else would take my place." Keanu's jaw tightened slightly, the only visible sign of anger. "They never asked if you were okay," he said. "No one did," Sandra replied, "except you. But you never asked with words. You asked with presence. And sometimes, presence is the loudest form of love." The word slipped out. Love. But not romantic love. Not dramatic love. A quieter kind. The kind that exists in loyalty, in protection, in choosing someone without needing recognition. Keanu looked at her, and something in his eyes softened. "I did not do anything special," he said. "That is what makes it special," Sandra answered. "You never made it a big act. You never made it about yourself." Keanu leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Sandra, you were going through battles I could not fix, but the least I could do was stand beside you. Silence is not empty. Sometimes it is support." Those words hit harder than any dramatic speech could. Sandra looked down at her hands. "It took me years to understand that some people are loud with words, and some people are loud with actions. You were the second kind?" Keanu shook his head lightly. "No, I just did what felt right." The humbleness in that sentence was something only real kindness could produce. But then, the conversation took a turn neither of them expected. Sandra said slowly, "You remember when people made fun of your silence? When they thought you were odd because you were always quiet?" Keanu nodded. "Yes, I remember. I used to think they were wrong," Sandra said. "But now I know something. You were not silent because you were shy. You were silent because you were always watching, always protecting, always choosing peace instead of noise." Keanu looked at her like he wanted to refuse the compliment, but knew she meant every word. That was the moment the truth finally stood clear between them. Keanu had not just been a co-star, not just a friend, not just a gentleman. He had been a shield, a silent shield standing without being seen, and the world never knew, but it was about to because the mic was still recording. Every sentence, every breath, every truth, and soon someone would hear it. Not someone searching for gossip, but someone doing a routine audio check. Someone who would notice voices that should not exist on the file. Someone who would think, "Wait." "This was recorded after the event ended," Sandra spoke again, her tone softer than before. "I do not know how to thank you after all these years." Keanu gave a tiny smile. "You do not have to, but I want to," she said. "Because if you had not been there back then, I would not be here right now." Keanu lowered his eyes. "You would have made it anyway." "No," Sandra replied firmly. "I would not have. The world sees strong people and thinks they never needed help. But the truth is we all survived because someone held us up when we were falling." Keanu didn't respond. He didn't need to. He understood her, but neither of them understood what was coming, because somewhere, in a studio room, a red light continued blinking, recording, storing, waiting, and the world, without knowing, was about to hear the most honest conversation Hollywood had ever produced, not designed for. Headlines not meant for cameras, not crafted for image, but real to real. Sandra looked at Keanu one more time and said something that would soon shake millions of people. "You did not just act beside me, Keanu. You held the pieces of my life that would have broken." And somewhere, the recording kept running, capturing kindness that was never meant to be seen until the day it would be. The recording continued without a single pause, still unnoticed, still storing every truth spoken in that empty hall. Time felt slower now, as if the world outside had no idea that something rare was happening. Not a scandal, not a fight, but a quiet unveiling of years of unspoken loyalty. Sandra took a moment before speaking again. She was not just remembering the past, she was finally releasing it. Sometimes the weight of gratitude can stay on a person for decades, waiting for the right moment to be voiced. "You know what hurts me now," she said softly. "It is not what people said back then. It is what I never said to you. I never told you thank you. Not truly." Keanu looked at her, the same steady calm in his eyes. "You did not have to. You showed it in the way you carried on." "But that is not enough," she replied. "I know you are the kind of man who never asks for credit. But I still should have told you, because what you did was not small. You changed the path of my life." Keanu shifted slightly in his seat, uncomfortable with praise the way only a truly humble person can be. "I only stood there," he said. "You did all the hard work." Sandra smiled a little, but the smile was filled with emotion. Standing there was the hard work. When the world turns cold, nothing is heavier than feeling alone. A silence settled again, but this time it felt warm. The kind of silence that exists between people who finally understand each other. But far away, not too far, a studio worker was entering the sound room. He walked in, checking systems before shutting down for the night. He pressed a few buttons, scanned the screen, then paused. He saw an active audio file, a file still recording. He frowned, leaned closer, pressed his headphones against his ears, and heard two voices that should not be there. He heard Sandra's voice first, calm and full of emotion. "You once told me that the world does not need to hear every good thing we do, but I think sometimes the world needs to know what loyalty looks like." The worker froze. This was no interview, no press question. This was private. Keanu spoke next, unaware of anything beyond that quiet stage. "Loyalty is not something I do. It is something I believe in. If we care about someone, we stand for them even when no one sees." Sandra leaned forward, her voice lower now, deeper, like she was sharing something no one else had ever heard. "Do you remember the day that director yelled at me in front of the whole crew?" Keanu nodded. "Yes." "Everyone laughed after he left," she continued. "Everyone acted like it was normal, even the people who called themselves my friends." "I remember," Keanu said quietly. "You did not say anything," she said. "You just walked beside me, slow and silent, like you were shielding me from something invisible. You did not fight him. You did not argue. You just made sure I did not walk away feeling small." Keanu's eyes softened. "I could not stop what he said, but I could stop it from reaching you." Those words carried a weight only real empathy can create. The studio worker kept listening, confused, unsure, a little overwhelmed. He took off the headphones for a moment and sat still, trying to decide whether this was an accident or a discovery. Then he put the headphones back on. He could not stop listening. Back on stage, Sandra placed her hand on the table, breathing slowly. "People say you are mysterious, Keanu," she said. "But I know the truth. You are not mysterious. You are kind in a world that is too loud to recognize kindness." Keanu looked down, almost shy. "I do not know how to be anything else." Sandra's eyes softened even more. "And that is exactly why the world needs to know you. The real you, not the headlines, not the memes, not the stories people invent. The quiet man who noticed pain without being told. The friend who did not leave." Keanu did not speak for a while. Then he said something that made Sandra's expression change. "Sandra, you saved me too." She looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" Keanu took a breath and the tone of the story shifted. "Everyone thinks I was the strong one back then," he said. "But the truth is I was barely holding myself together." Sandra's eyes widened. She had never heard that before. "You?" she whispered. "You were struggling too?" Keanu nodded slowly. "We all hide things. You hid your sadness with smiles. I hid mine with silence." Sandra leaned in closer, her voice full of shock. "You never told me." "I did not want to add to what you were already carrying," he replied. "And besides, watching you fight your way through each day gave me strength to keep going too." The line shook her. The audience would one day replay that moment again and again, not because of drama, but because of how truth often reverses the story we thought we knew. The strongest people are sometimes the ones who needed saving too. Sandra swallowed slowly, her voice trembling. "You mean, all this time, we were protecting each other without knowing?" Keanu nodded. "Maybe that is what real friendship is," he said. "Not promises, not words, just two people quietly keeping each other from falling." The studio worker listening felt something he had never felt from any celebrity recording. This was not for the press. This was not for cameras. This was real. And for the first time, he understood something. The world worships fame, but it forgets that behind the spotlight are humans holding each other up in silence. He took off the headphones again, staring at the screen, stunned. He had a choice. Delete it, report it, or Let it exist, but that choice would come later for now. The recording continued, and Sandra leaned even closer to Keanu, saying something that would soon echo through millions of hearts. Keanu, the world sees your silence and thinks it is emptiness. But I have lived long enough to know the truth. Your silence is not empty. It is full of protection. Keanu looked at her gently. And your strength is not loud, he replied. It is the kind that survives storms without letting anyone see the rain. Two people, two truths finally spoken, and every second of it was being kept inside a file that fate had not planned. But destiny had, because sometimes the world needs to hear what was never meant to be said aloud, not for fame, not for gossip, but for proof that kindness still exists, 7 in silence. The studio worker sat frozen in his chair, staring at the audio wave on the screen. The recording had now passed 1 full hour, and the voices were still coming through clearly. He did not know whether to stop it, report it, or pretend he never heard it. All he knew was that something rare was happening. Not staged, not scripted, not planned, something too honest to ignore, but he also knew one thing very clearly. If this recording ever reached the world, it would change the way people saw both of them forever. Not because of drama, not because of romance, but because of the kind of truth that is almost never spoken out loud in Hollywood. Meanwhile, back in the hall, Keanu and Sandra were still talking, unaware that every word was being held like a living memory inside a machine. Sandra looked at Keanu with a quiet expression, almost like she was seeing the past through new eyes. I always wondered, she said, why you never defended yourself when people made jokes about you being too quiet. Too serious, too different. Keanu shrugged softly. I did not need to defend myself. I know who I am. But it did not bother you? She asked. Keanu paused, thinking. It hurt sometimes, he said honestly. Not because they judged me, but because they did not understand the reason behind the silence. Sandra waited. Keanu continued. Silence is not weakness. Silence is where I can hear myself think. And sometimes silence is the only place where I can protect what is still soft inside me. That line did something to Sandra. She never knew how much strength it took to stay calm in a world that rewards noise. You once told me, she said slowly, that you do not speak unless your words can make the space better. Keanu nodded. Yes, because words are not just sounds. They are choices. The room held that sentence like something fragile and valuable. Sandra lowered her voice. You know, when I look back at my career, people think the turning point was a hit movie or a big award. But the real turning point was something invisible. It was the moment I realized I was not fighting alone. Keanu's eyes softened. I am glad you knew that. I did not know it then, she said. I only understand it now. I survived because someone stood beside me without needing to be seen. Keanu looked down at the table, his fingers tracing the edge of the wood slowly. I never wanted to be seen, he said. I just wanted you to feel safe. The truth in that sentence was so pure that it almost felt unreal, and yet it was real enough to make the listener in the studio take a deep breath, real enough to make Sandra close. Her eyes, for a moment, real enough to remind anyone who heard it that kindness without attention is the rarest form of power. Sandra opened her eyes again. Keanu, do you know what the world thinks our friendship is? Keanu gave a soft grin. A nice Hollywood reunion? Yes, she said. But they do not know what really connects us. And the funny thing is, I don't think even I knew until this moment. Keanu tilted his head slightly. What connects us? Sandra didn't answer right away. She sat with the emotion of it first, letting it settle, letting it shape into words. Then she said it. We are connected by the things we never said. Keanu looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that only appears when truth hits too close. Yes, he said quietly. The strongest bonds are built in silence. Those words would one day be quoted across the world, not because they were dramatic, but because they were painfully real. But in that moment, they were just two people who finally understood the language they had been speaking for decades. Not through speeches, not through public gestures, but through presence. But then Sandra asked a question she had never asked before. Keanu, did you ever feel like walking away from everything too? Keanu did not answer immediately. Instead, he breathed in slowly like someone about to open a door they had kept locked for years. "Yes," he said at last. "More than once." Sandra stared at him, stunned. "I thought you were the strong one," she said. "No," Keanu replied gently. "I was just quiet about my storms." Sandra leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you stay?" Keanu's answer was simple. "Because you stayed." Sandra blinked, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. "Me?" "Yes," Keanu said. "You kept going, even when it hurt. Even when no one knew. Watching you keep moving gave me a reason to keep moving too. And that was the moment the truth flipped. For years, the world believed Keanu had been the silent protector. But now, another layer appeared. They had been protecting each other in ways neither fully understood, in ways neither needed explained. Two quiet fighters, two different storms, one shared resilience. In the recording room, the studio worker removed his headphones again. But this time it was not because he was unsure. It was because the honesty of what he heard was too real to listen to without feeling something. This was not a story of celebrity, but of humanity. He looked at the screen, looked at the audio file still recording, and whispered to himself, "People need to hear this. Not for entertainment, but for hope on stage." Sandra wiped her eyes slightly, but not because she was sad. She suddenly understood something she had never realized before. They did not survive Hollywood because they were strong. They survived because they did not let each other fall. Sandra spoke again, voice full of something deep and steady. "Keanu, the world thinks the greatest thing you ever did was in a movie, but it wasn't. It was outside the camera. It was the way you stood next to me when I had nothing left to hold." Keanu didn't move, didn't react, didn't deflect. Instead, he asked a question almost no one else in his place would ask. "Did it help?" Sandra nodded slowly. "It saved me." Keanu exhaled softly. "Then it was worth it." And that was it. No applause, no lights, no music. Just a man who believed saving even one person was enough to make an entire life meaningful, and a woman who finally said the words she had carried for decades in silence, but the world would not stay silent much longer because a recording existed, and recordings have a way of finding ears, especially when the truth inside them is too powerful to stay hidden. The studio worker sat alone in the sound room, staring at the screen like he was holding something dangerous and priceless at the same time. The recording had now captured more than an hour of raw truth. Not gossip, not scandal, but something deeper than any headline could ever describe. He replayed the last few lines again, just to be sure he had heard them right. "Did it help?" "It saved me." Then it was worth it. He had never heard anything like it. No scripts, no ego, no performance. Just two people finally admitting how much they had done for each other. Quietly, invisibly, without asking for anything back. And suddenly, he knew something. This was not just a recording. This was a lesson, a reminder, a rare piece of humanity. But he also knew he could not keep it to himself. While he wrestled with that decision, the conversation on stage continued. Sandra took a deep breath, her tone gentler than ever. "Keanu, people think kindness is soft, but it is the strongest thing I have ever known." Keanu nodded. "Kindness is not weakness. It is courage without noise." Sandra smiled a little. "You could have walked away from me back then. I was a mess. I had nothing to offer you in return." Keanu shook his head. "Friendship is not an exchange. It is a decision." That sentence would one day be quoted everywhere. Then Sandra said something that stopped even Keanu for a moment. "I kept every moment of your silent support. Even if I never said a word," Keanu replied quietly. "I never did it to be remembered." "I know," Sandra said, "and that is why I remember it." The hall went still again. Not empty, but full. Full of everything that had never been said until now. And then, without knowing the recording still lived, Sandra gave the line that would change how millions saw their bond forever. "You did not just act beside me, Keanu. You protected the parts of me no one could see." Keanu looked at her with the same calmness that had held her together years. "Ego. And you protected." "Mine too," he said. "Two people, two storms, two shields, one." Truth, and all of it was now captured forever. The studio worker finally stood up, took a breath, and made his choice. He copied the recording, saved it to a separate drive, and whispered to himself, "The world needs to hear this. Not for views, not for drama, but because honesty that pure should not stay trapped in silence. The truth was no longer hidden. It was only waiting." The next morning began like any other day in the studio. The world was busy, the news cycle was loud, and no one knew that a single audio file was about to shift the way millions understood kindness, respect, and quiet loyalty. The studio worker who found the recording did not sleep. He kept replaying the audio again and again, trying to understand why it felt so powerful. It was not dramatic, it was not designed to be emotional, but it carried something that modern life rarely shows. Two humans being honest, no audience, no cameras, no performance, only truth. He sat at his desk, staring at the file, knowing he could not leak it without consequences. But he also knew something even bigger. This was not a private secret. This was a gift, so he made a decision that surprised even himself. He did not send it to the press. He did not upload it online. He sent it back directly to the people who said the words, to Keanu and Sandra. That afternoon, both of them received the same message in their inbox. "This recording was never meant to exist, but it does. Before anyone else hears it, you deserve to decide what should happen to it." Attached was the audio file. When Keanu opened it, he froze. When Sandra listened to it, her heart stopped for a moment. Every breath, every pause, every truth they never planned to reveal was now captured forever. Sandra called Keanu first. "Did you hear it?" she asked softly. "Yes," he replied. "Every second." They both went quiet. Not because they were afraid, but because they understood the depth of what had happened. After a long silence, Sandra spoke. "Keanu, that was the most unfiltered we have ever been." Keanu nodded even though she could not see him. "I never thought the world would hear those words," he said. "Do you want to keep it private?" Sandra asked. "We can delete it forever. No one has to hear anything." Keanu took a moment before answering. Then he said something that showed exactly why he was the man people admired in silence. "I am not worried about what people will think of me," he said. "I am thinking about the people who might need to hear this." Sandra felt that. "You mean people who feel alone?" she asked. "Yes," he answered. "People who think kindness is invisible. People who think no one stands with them. Maybe this recording can show them that someone always does, even if they never notice it." Sandra felt a tear, but it was not sadness. It was recognition. "So we let the world hear it," she whispered. "If you agree," Keanu replied. She smiled through the silence. "I agree." And that is how the recording reached the world. Not as gossip, not as a leak, not as a scandal, but as a message, a voice note from reality, proof that kindness still exists, even when no one is watching. When the public finally heard it, the reaction was not what Hollywood expected. No one laughed, no one mocked, no one asked for drama. Instead, people said things like, "I did not know friendship could be this pure. This is what loyalty sounds like. They protected each other without even knowing it. This is the kind of bond the world needs more of." Millions shared it, not because it was emotional, but because it was real. There was no background music, no microphone quality, no scripted lines, just two humans reminding the world that the strongest relationships are not built in front of cameras. They are built in moments no one else sees, and something beautiful happened. After that, interviewers stopped asking superficial questions about their chemistry, fans stopped making up stories of romance. The world finally understood. The truth, Keanu and Sandra did not need a label. Their connection was not based on drama. It was based on respect, strength, silent protection, and a kind of loyalty that does not fade with time. People started calling it the friendship that never needed attention to exist. And in the middle of all the reactions, all the headlines, All the viral messages, something else happened too. Letters from strangers arrived not for gossip, but for gratitude. Messages like, "Your conversation gave me hope again. I am the quiet one in my group. Now I feel seen. I never realized how important it is to stand by someone silently. Now I know that kindness can be invisible and still change lives." And for the first time in many years, Sandra and Keanu understood the true meaning of what had happened. The mic did not expose them. It revealed them not as celebrities, but as humans doing the quiet work that matters most. In the end, Sandra said something in a small interview, not to promote a film, but to explain why they chose to release the recording. "The world hears enough noise. Maybe it was time they heard kindness." And Keanu, in his calm, gentle way, added, "You do not need to be seen to make a difference. You just need to care." And that was it. No dramatic ending, no forced message, no emotional soundtrack, just the truth, the kind of truth that does not fade, because real kindness does not need applause, it just needs to exist. And in the end, the world did not just hear what Sandra said to Keanu. It finally understood why she said it.